Hey Fred, Jerry here, and it is time now to take a look at the box office results for this past weekend, November 14th through the 16th. And it was a fairly good weekend and a couple of surprises, to be honest with you. November has been a decent start, at least so far. It's going to pick up quite a bit this next weekend, and I'll get to that here in a minute. But this past weekend was okay, even though there was a little bit of a minor disappointment in there for Paramount Pictures. But in first place this past weekend, we have a movie from a franchise that I know very little about. I've never seen any of the movies, and perhaps I should. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any of the Now You See Me movies, because this week's number one movie was Now You See Me, Now You Don't, the third installment in the Now You See Me franchise, which I guess is about a bunch of magicians. The franchise has been going for, I believe, right around 12 years. I think the first movie came out in 2013. And it has a pretty consistent fan base, apparently. I did some research and I see that Now You See Me 2, when it came out in 2016, opening weekend did about $22.4 million. Well, this past weekend, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, the third movie, grossed $21.3 million in its opening weekend. Now, the grosses have dropped as each movie has been released. And even though it looks like it was a small drop from the one that was released in 2016, remember that 22 million figure was not adjusted for inflation. So the differential in the grosses would have been quite larger, obviously, if you were to adjust that number for inflation. But still a pretty decent opening, and I think even one that caught everyone by surprise, a little bit of a surprise anyways, because this movie, like I said, really it's been quite a while since the last one came out. They really didn't know if there was still going to be an audience for this, but I guess there was some suspicion that this movie might end up doing okay at least, because on Netflix, I guess, where they have been streaming the first two movies, I guess over the past few months, the viewership on those movies has increased month to month. So they did have some idea that there was at least some interest out there, possibly for this movie, and it pans out, really. It opened on about 3,400 screens, and the per screen average for Now You See Me, Now You Don't was a little bit over 6,200 per screen average. So a pretty decent opening. Now, all right, so this weekend in November traditionally is what's been known as the James Bond weekend. This is the weekend when the James Bond movies would typically get released and become pretty successful in doing so. So it's kind of a weekend that is targeted towards movies that would appeal to men. And that is why Paramount Pictures decided to go ahead and release The Running Man this past weekend, which is a remake of the 1980s Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which in itself was an adaptation from a Stephen King novel. Now, The Running Man back in the 80s was a moderate success, so Paramount Pictures really believed that this updated version of The Running Man would fit well in this November time slot, which, if memory serves, I believe this movie originally was supposed to come out last month during October. So they actually delayed it specifically to fit it in this weekend. There wasn't really a whole lot of competition for it. And the early projections on The Running Man was that it would take in around $20 million this past weekend. Well, it did actually fall a little short and ended up finishing in second place. Not a great finish for it, bringing in about $17 million. So it did fall a bit below expectations. Now, the good news for The Running Man is that in the upcoming weeks, there isn't a whole lot of competition for it. So there may be some legs here, but the movie on Rotten Tomatoes only scored about a 65, 66%. So I don't know if that's going to be a good enough score. The critic score or the audience score wasn't that much different from it either, from the Rotten Tomatoes score. So I don't know if audiences have that interest to catch it, or is this one of those front-loaded movies where it just does so well on opening weekend. Second weekend takes a substantial drop. We'll see that next week and see how it holds up heading into the holidays. But The Running Man opened on 3,500, a little bit over 3,500 screens. And as far as a per screen average, only broke a little bit over $4,800 for a per screen average. So not a great per screen average. And the production budget on The Running Man is $110 million. So this is a movie that if you're looking at it from Paramount's perspective, I would say that they're looking at this as a movie that really has to have some type of legs at the box office, because they're really going to have a hard time making this money back, which means they're going to have to gross in the neighborhood of 200 to 250 million just to clear a profit. And opening with a 17 million figure, that one could be hard. It's another story. Those higher budgeted movies, man, you have to make so much money to get that money back. That's why those studios that are making the 10, 15, $20 million movies are actually having probably higher profit margins, because their product, they just make their products a little bit less expensive. These big special effects movies and everything like The Running Man, they just, that production budget just keeps on raking up higher and higher and higher. And pretty soon it just becomes unsustainable, I would think, but we'll see. So The Running Man opening up a little bit disappointing here. In third place is where we find last week's number one movie, kind of a surprise number one the way it opened, and that is Predator: Badlands, which unfortunately this weekend took a really bad drop of 68%. So a really huge drop in its second weekend. But I dare say that a lot of this audience may have been taken off, or at least some of the potential audience for Predator may have actually been swayed to go see Running Man this weekend. So we'll see. Predator, unlike Running Man, has really good reviews, both from critics and audiences. So Predator could really have some legs through the holidays. So even though this is a 68% drop, bringing in another 13 million this past weekend for a domestic gross of over 66 million already. I think this is a movie that has potential to do, to leg it out a little bit. In fourth place is the romantic movie Regretting You, which is the latest movie that has been adapted from a Colleen Hoover book. And by the way, we have a couple more Colleen Hoover adaptations coming out in 2026, which coincidentally, you will be able to see I'll be talking about in a couple of my upcoming videos, where I take a look at the movies that are to be released in 2026, and really taking a look at where I see the box office going in 2026. Are we going to rebound, or is it going to be another off year? And you might be a little bit surprised. So be looking for those videos on my channel here. But Regretting You finishes in fourth place. This movie has actually developed some little legs. Its weekly grosses haven't been anything spectacular, but the percentages of drop from week to week have actually been quite impressive. This week it does drop another 40% from last weekend, but brings in another $4 million. And its domestic gross is approaching 45 million right now. So not bad for Regretting You. And in fifth place, a movie that my husband, Santo, and I are actually going to be watching and doing a couple videos for on our other channel, Movie Haunts, which, by the way, you can join us if you're a horror film fan. Join us over on Movie Haunts. I will leave that link in the description for you as well. And if I remember, it'll be on the screen right here too. So join us over on Movie Haunts. But we will be doing a reaction and a review to the movie Black Phone 2, which is this week's number 5 movie, the sequel to the really successful Black Phone. Black Phone 2 has been just about as successful, even though this weekend it does tumble another 49% from last weekend, bringing in 2.7 million, but that domestic total is right around 75 million, which is right around where the original was. So this movie actually does look, going into the holiday season, like it might actually do a little bit better than the original. Now, talking about a great hold, let's go down into the number 6 movie of the week, and that is the movie Nuremberg, which only dropped 33%. It opened last weekend, didn't do that great, I would say, for an opening weekend. A movie that I thought could actually be an awards contender. And this kind of drop makes me think that it very well might be a little bit of a dark horse. I haven't seen this movie. I am looking forward to it, but it only dropped 33% this week and is still in 6th place, bringing in another $2.6 million. There isn't a whole lot of counter programming out there that is going to really act as competition for this movie. And so heading into the holiday season, this is one of those movies that could kind of stick around in the top 10, make a little bit of money, and even raise a few eyebrows from those people that decide the award nominations. The domestic total on Nuremberg right now is 8.6 million. So, like I said, it's not setting the world on fire, but compared to other movies, that have come out, including Springsteen, Deliver Me from Nowhere, which I think is completely out of the top 10 right now. Compared to those movies that really had all the Oscar buzz surrounding them early on, I think Nuremberg is actually outshining a lot of those movies. So we'll see what direction this one heads in the next few weeks, but it'll be an interesting run. And the biggest loser of the week, going back to a biggest loser, because there definitely was one this week, this one really saddens me, and that is the Osgood Perkins movie Keeper, which only opened up in 7th place. Really disappointing from the director who brought us Longlegs and The Monkey from earlier this year. Both excellent movies. The Monkey, in fact, one of my favorite movies of the year. I'm really excited to see Keeper, but I know a couple of the reviews out there, like I know Cody Leach did a review on it, was not very impressed. And it looks like the audiences, there was something about the trailer that just didn't attract them. And I don't get it. Maybe they just didn't know about it. I don't know what the reason was. I thought the trailer was pretty awesome, but I'm an Osgood Perkins fan. So we'll see. Obviously, I'll be doing a review on this one. We'll do it on our Movie Haunts channel as soon as we can get a chance to see it. But Keeper this week only opened up in 7th place, only bringing in 2.5 million. So really being outdone by the second week of Nuremberg. So that tells you just how really bad this movie did. A real disappointment for Neon Studios. It opened on 1,950 screens, so 1,950 screens, and its per screen average was under $1,300 per screen. So a real tough weekend for Osgood. So next week is going to be an interesting week because the grosses are definitely going to go up. There is definitely going to be a blockbuster board next week as Wicked for Good is released. Now, here's the tricky thing about it, though, because I do believe that Wicked for Good can actually hit around 150 million its opening weekend. Zero competition out there for it. And they're just going to be, theaters are going to be packed for it opening weekend. Most of the premiere shows, especially at night, or the IMAX shows, or, it's going to be really, really busy. The first movie opening weekend brought in around 112 million. I do see Wicked for Good possibly outperforming that number. But the weekend as a whole, I think still could actually come up a little bit weaker than where we were last year. Even though Wicked last year was released, the first Wicked was released the same weekend, Gladiator 2 was also released that same weekend. So even though Wicked did 112 million, Gladiator 2 did around 55 million. So those two combined was huge. So we're talking about this year where it looks like Wicked for Good could bring in 150 million, and then we'll have to see what the rest of the grosses are like. Best case scenario, I believe, is going to be pretty much an identical or a wash of whatever number it was last year, that they're very similar this year, the business. Worst case scenario is this weekend this year actually underperforms from where it was last year. I did not read what the pre-sales on Wicked for Good looks like right now. I probably should have done that before I turned on the camera, but either way, Wicked for Good will definitely be the top movie of next weekend, and we'll just see how close to 150 million it can get, or will it even go over that? We shall see. I happen to think that this movie will outgross the original, just because it just seems like there's this energy behind it. But we will find that out next week. All right, but for now, my friends, that will do it for this video. And if you made it this far, I'm assuming you've enjoyed this content a little bit at least. So I would appreciate it if you haven't already, if you would go ahead and subscribe to my channel, as well as like and share this video. Let me know what you think of these movies. Did you see any of these movies that I've discussed here? What was your impression of these movies? I'd love to hear about it in the comments section. And of course, if you'd like to support me as well as earn yourself a ton of rewards, I'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. It's the Movie Haunts Patreon page, but it does cover both of our YouTube channels, this one as well as Movie Haunts, the channel that I do with my husband. So you kind of get benefits from both channels on one Patreon membership. And right now, regardless of the tier you choose, you will receive a 7-day free trial membership, which means you get to try most of the rewards anyways, absolutely risk-free. So I'd love to have you over there with us as well. All right, so that is going to be it for now, but I look forward to seeing you again real soon. And until then, that's a wrap.